All right, we are live. We are here with Nir Eyal. Hey, all, it's Shed here. Hop into the comments once you're here. I'd love to see who's joining us and where you are joining us from. I am in Toronto per usual. And Nir, you're in Singapore, is that right?
I am. That's right. It's bright and
Cool.
early in Singapore. It's tomorrow for you here in Singapore,
Yes.
and the future's bright. Looks good. Tomorrow's gonna be
No,
a
very
great day.
good to know. I'm in the back, you are in the future. So
That's
this is
right.
very good. Nice. Get the flux capacitor working this evening. Feel free as you join us. Usually I do lives in my afternoon, but we didn't want to get Near to wake up at 2 a.m. So we decided to go evening. But let's hop in there. We're here to talk about Hooked, about Indistractable, your two books. I mean, Hooked is really about product forming, habit forming ideas, and which delighted to learn more, and how sort of Hooked led you into into Indistractable. But yeah, I mean, sort of paint a little bit of picture of like what you're interested in, what got you onto these ideas, and we can pick it apart. And as we hop in, love to hear some comments from folks as you join us, and what questions and comments you have along the way. Hey, Robert, good to see you. Welcome.
Yeah, so I'm what you call a behavioral designer. So I help companies build products and services that get people hooked to healthy habits. So I work with companies in educational products to get kids hooked to online learning. I work with financial services to get people hooked to saving and making money. I work with health tech companies to get people in the habit of exercise and eating right. So that's the focus of my kind of day-to-day job.
Mm-hmm.
And that came out of my own need to figure out how to build habit forming products for myself. I started two tech companies and I wanted to start a third, and I didn't see a book on how to build habit forming products. So I decided to research the topic and started blogging about it. And that led to a speaking gig at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where I was a lecturer in marketing for several years. And then I moved over to the Hasselplatter Institute of Design. And that class became my first book, Hooked, How to Build Habit Forming Products, which is all about how to build good habits with the technology that we use.
Mm.
And then a few years later, I wrote my second book, Indistractable, which is about how do we break those bad habits.
Nice. And bad habits around Hooked, or bad habits I mean, it's around traction and distraction, but can you say more about what those bad habits might be? And then I also want to dive a bit more into Hooked and how we form habits.
Yeah, so I kind of took my expertise in terms of understanding the psychology of how products are designed to be habit forming to break down how we can break the bad habits that don't serve us, specifically around distraction. I felt that I was getting distracted in my own life, and at
Mm-hmm.
first my reaction was, "It's the technology. This is everybody's knee-jerk reaction. It's the technology's fault." And I thought it was, but it wasn't, because even when I got rid of the technology, I got myself a flip phone, the kind that we used to use in the 90s. I got myself a word processor
Mm.
off of eBay that did nothing but allow me to write with no internet connection whatsoever. And I still got distracted, right? I still, I would see the book on a shelf and I'd say, oh, I've been meaning to read that book, or look at my desk. My desk needs cleaning up, or I should really take out the trash right now. And I kept getting distracted. It's very much
Mm.
like a fad diet. And I think it's, very topical, where people say, oh, the problem is fat, the problem is carbs, the problem is this, the problem is that. Well, you can gain weight on any diet, right?
Yep.
You'll find something. I went on the keto diet a few years ago, and I gained weight because I had way too much fat and bacon and stuff that makes you gain weight.
Yep.
So, excising just one potential culprit as the source of the problem. This is what we're doing today with technology. Oh, social media is hacking our brains. It's total rubbish. It's not true.
Mm.
The
Mm.
problem is much deeper than that. And if you don't understand the deeper problem, you're always going to be distracted by one thing or another.
Yeah, I'm literally getting a vision of cave person walking out of cave, going hunting and gathering, and going, "Ooh, butterfly!" Like it's just in our wiring, which I think is curiosity.
Yeah.
We,
And
you
it's
know,
okay,
we,
that's an extreme example, but no joke. Plato was complaining about how distracting the world was 2,500 years ago. He called it akrasia in the Greek, the tendency to do things against our better interests. So if
Mhm.
people have been complaining about distraction and how the kids these days, all their brains are being hijacked by this crazy new technology of the written word. I'm not making this up. This is actually what Aristotle said. Or, sorry,
Mhm.
Socrates, not Aristotle. Socrates said the written word was a terrible technology and was going to, quote, enfeeble men's minds. And people said the same junk about the radio and the television and rap music and Dungeons and Dragons and every new technology, the printing press. People freak out and think that's the reason that I have all these problems in my life. That's why I can't get things done. That's never the root cause. There's something much deeper going on that we have to understand.
Nice. Seeing some great comments in hello here. We have Carlos in Mexico City, Lisa also in Toronto. She says, no, I'm actually at my cottage trying to limit the distractions while I write my book. Maybe you should turn this off. But hey, if this is valuable for you, glad you're here.
The thing is, actually, with I'm so glad Lisa tuned in, because the truth is, if you don't understand why you get distracted, even escaping to a cottage in the woods won't solve the problem. Because the problem is not just with our external environment, right? The real problem, the real reason we get distracted, it's up here.
Yeah.
That 90%, studies have found this, 90%, 90, of our distractions are not external triggers. 10% of our distractions come from external triggers, the pings, the dings, the rings, all the things in our outside environment. 90% come from what we call internal triggers. Internal triggers are uncomfortable emotional states that we seek to escape from. And those are always with us because they're up here. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety. This is the cause of 90% of our distractions. So if we don't tackle that, if we don't understand how to master these internal triggers, they become our master.
Very good. Very good. And I know you have that, if XY axis of internal trigger, external trigger, distraction, and traction, which is around, and it's that pull, right? The pull of action with or without intent. Do you want to walk us through that?
Sure. This is super important because, we have to define what is distraction really. And the best way to understand what distraction is to understand what distraction is not. Most people, if you ask them, what's the opposite of distraction? They'll tell you it's focus. That's my problem. I don't want to be distracted. I want to be focused. But that's not actually the opposite of distraction. Focus is what you do with your attention, but it's not the opposite of distraction. The opposite of distraction, if you look at the origin of the word, the opposite of distraction is traction. Of course, we have traction and distraction. It seems obvious in hindsight. It took me years to figure this out, by the way.
But thanks, by the way, for sharing that revelation with all of us. It helps us for years. Yeah.
Once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it. And this is more than just semantics. This is super important. You notice that both words, traction and distraction, end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N. That spells action, reminding us that distraction is not something that happens to us, but rather it is an action that we take. So traction, by definition, it comes from the Latin root trahare, which means to pull, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things you do with intent, things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction, distraction, is any action that pulls you further away from what you said you were going to do, further away from your goals, further away from your values, further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So this is super important because I would argue any action can be traction or distraction based on one word. And that one word is intent. That if you planned to go on social media, there's nothing wrong with social media. Enjoy it. Have fun. Go interact with your friends. Do whatever you want. There's nothing wrong with this. We have to stop moralizing and medicalizing and shaming people into using these wonderful technologies. They're great, but use them on your schedule, not someone else's, certainly not the tech company's schedule. So anything can be traction as long as you do it with intent. Conversely, anything can be distraction if you're not doing it for the right reasons. Let me give you an example. For years, I would sit down at my desk at work and say, okay, today I'm not going to get distracted. I've got to work on that big project. I'm going to get started. Here I go right now. But first, let me check some email, right? How many times has that happened to us? We say, oh, that's a work-related.
I've never done that. Never done.
Of course, this never happens to you. But for the rest of us, it certainly happened to me all the time.
Yeah, fair.
That I would say, well, I'm being productive. I have to do this at some point. Or, oh, let me check these things off my to-do list. Those tasks. I just get started. Do some easy tasks. By the way, we can talk about why to-do lists are one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity. We can talk about that in a minute. Okay. But what we tend to do is that we prioritize the urgent and the easy work at the expense of the hard and important work we have to do to move our lives and careers forward. So anything can be a distraction. Even checking email right? That's the biggest source of distraction, are these distractions like email, checking, those cute little boxes on my to-do list, even though that's not the most important thing to do. That's the worst kind of distraction because you don't even realize it's happening. That's when distraction tricks you and you don't even see that it's happening because you're thinking, oh, I'm doing productive work. But if it's not what you said you would do in advance with your time, it is just as much of a distraction as playing video games or going on social media might be.
And for you, is that, or as we look at that, is that an internal trigger? Avoid pain, avoid hard work. Like what is that as we take a level deeper, looking into that action or distraction?
Right. So we've got traction, we've got distraction. You can think about them as arrows pointing to the left and to the right.
Yeah.
Then you've got internal triggers and external triggers pushing at the center of our actions that shift our actions towards traction or distraction.
Okay.
So internal triggers and external triggers, they're not good or bad. They just are, right? The pings and dings in our environment, for example, those external triggers, if it's telling you, hey, your watch is ringing because you've got an important meeting that you planned for, or it's time to go exercise, or it's time to do what you said you were going to do, that external trigger can be very helpful. But if that external trigger is telling you to go do something you didn't plan to do, well, now it's not helpful. It's hurtful. It's leading you towards distraction rather than traction. So those account for about 10% of our distractions. And it turns out there's all kinds of easy stuff we can do to help hack back those external triggers. It's, we talk about how technology is hijacking our brains. Yeah, but we are so much more powerful than the technology. We can hack back, right? Don't complain to me about how technology is addictive if you haven't even taken 5 minutes to change the notification settings on your phone. This is kindergarten stuff. What's really distracting are the things that we're not even talking about, right? We're not talking about how distracting meetings are. How many of us spend hours a day on meetings that did not need to be called for, right? That's what's really distracting. We talk about the technology. We don't talk about the structural stuff in our organizations that are a big fat waste of time. Kids, right? We love our kids. They're fantastic, but they can be incredibly distracting. So what do we do about that? We have to hack back each and every one of these external triggers. But again, those are only 10% of the causes of distraction. 90% comes from these internal triggers. And again, internal triggers aren't good or bad. They just are. What we find is that high performers leverage those internal triggers to push them, right, to propel them like rocket fuel towards their goals. They use that uncertainty, stress, anxiety, they leverage it towards traction rather than what most people do. Low performers, whenever they feel stress, whenever they feel anxious, whenever they feel fearful, they escape it. They escape it by watching the news, right? Let me worry about somebody's problems thousands of miles away, so I don't have to worry about my own problems. They escape it with booze, right? They drink their problems away. They escape it with Facebook, with football. They find one thing or another to take their mind off their problems because they don't want to think about and deal with that discomfort. And this is the state of perpetual distraction. When you are incapable of dealing with those internal triggers in a healthy way. And by the way, this was me. I wrote this book for me more than anyone else. I used to be clinically obese. I was constantly distracted. When I started getting a little bit of success from my first book, I found that I was more and more distracted away from the thing that made me successful in the first place because I was getting all these emails and inquiries. And so it's absolutely essential. The first step to becoming indistractable is mastering those internal triggers, because if you don't master them, they become your master.
And what I'm assuming here is, because we hear the word trigger and I think we automatically think negative, but what I'm hearing from you is it isn't negative or positive. Triggers just are. And triggers, I'm hearing, can also be in line with our values and beliefs as well, and can have us take intentful action. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I'm really trying to reclaim this term trigger because it does have this negative connotation that it's something that we should avoid. And I think that is very maladaptive. That what we see is that the human species is not evolved, designed, whatever your belief is, for perpetual bliss. We need to feel dissatisfied. It is part of our DNA. Think about it. If there was ever a species of Homo sapiens that was satisfied all the time, that was contented at all instances, you know what would have happened? Our ancestors, when they met these people, would have killed and eaten them. Okay? That is not a beneficial evolutionary trait. What keeps us going, what keeps us driven, what keeps us motivated, what keeps us working to improve the world, to create life-changing medicine, to overturn despots, to create, to invent, to reach for the moon, is the fact that we feel discomfort. That is the fuel. That's the motivation. Everything we do, in fact, everything we do is about the desire to escape discomfort. We used to think it's about pain and pleasure, right? This was Sigmund Freud said this. Jeremy Bentham said this. Neurologically, it's not true that everything you do is about the desire to escape discomfort. And once you realize that, you can utilize that discomfort or you can escape it. So high performers utilize it. It becomes rocket fuel. Low performers, distractible people who don't learn this skill set, they escape it with some kind of distraction. The good news is we can all become indistractable. We can all learn to see these internal triggers differently, so they serve us as opposed to us serving them.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what I love, and please keep questions and comments coming. And if you do have questions for Nir on this, please put them in. Love to hear your questions here. But what I love about what you're saying, Nir, is it's actually quite empowering when you frame traction and distraction. It takes the power away, both from external and internal, and makes us the author of what we choose, and to have us own what we choose as well, which is quite an empowering belief and idea, which I love.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for many people, that's actually, they don't like that, right? Not everybody likes
You mean
this idea.
I'm responsible for...
Exactly. This is why you hear so many people.
It's a growth mindset, though, isn't it?
It is very much so. I love the work of Carol Dweck with growth mindset and how it's how we see these things that determines how they affect us. You know, the popular press and countless YouTube videos love to tell us about how these things are controlling us because it's clickbait, right? We love to hear about how this technology and that technology is doing it to us.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is we have a huge role here too, right? And if you sit and wait for the tech companies to fix this for you or the geniuses in government to fix it for you, if you hold your breath, you will suffocate. And the good news is we can do this. And it's not just technology, right? We today technology is kind of the villain of the day. But the distraction comes in all kinds of forms, right? It can come in the form of eating the wrong things or too much, not exercising enough, not being with our family enough, not being focused at work. We will always find distraction in one form or another. So it's not about the thing that distracts us. It's getting down to the core of why we get distracted in the first place.
Nice. So as we hopped on, you made me think of a question that we said, ooh, let's save it for the live. So, I think about Hooked. I think about creating habit forming products. How do you, I'm assuming there's something to do with dopamine reward system, perhaps, but how do you, in your very sort of Albert Einstein fashion, how do you avoid the atom bomb here of creating habit forming to the point that they are addictive? Or is that just the nature of it and we have to choose ourselves?
So addiction is very different from a habit. A habit is a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. And we have good habits and we have bad habits, right? 50% of your behavior every single day is done out of habit. And habits are great, right? When we drive a car, we drive it habitually. How do I know? Because you can drive a car with little or no conscious thought while you're listening to a podcast or talking to a friend sitting next to you. That, habits are just a form of learning. An addiction is something else. And this is a term that we toss around a lot. And it drives me crazy because an addiction is a pathology. Okay. An addiction is a persistent compulsive dependency on a behavior or substance that harms the user. There is no such thing as a good addiction. It's like saying, Tourette's or obsessive compulsive disorder or epilepsy. These are disorders. They are not, oh, I like something a lot. That's not the same thing as an addiction. And we toss this term around, addiction. Oh, my wife got a box of shoes. And on the side of the box of shoes that she ordered online, it said, danger, addictive contents inside. And we toss around. Yeah, DSW. If you buy shoes from DSW, that's what the box says. It's crazy. Like potato chips. We have a bag of potato chips that says highly addictive. Come on. It's not, we're using the term incorrectly. And I think the problem with this is say, okay, whatever, it's semantics. You know what it means. The problem is, one, it's very disrespectful to people who actually have this disorder. Addiction is a terrible pathology. It's something that people really struggle with. And if you actually are addicted, it's not ooh, I like playing video games. I like Candy Crush. No, an addiction is a persistent compulsive dependency. It's horrible. Second thing that's really bad about this this mindset is that for people who use this terminology, it is incredibly disempowering. Because when you call something addictive, it has control over you. Now there's a dealer, there's a pusher, there's someone doing it to me. And so what happened? This leads to what's called learned helplessness. What happens when people say, oh, there's nothing I can do about it, right? I'm addicted. What do? Nothing, because it's not my control. I'm addicted. My brain's hijacked. And so that type of terminology hurts the person using it because it leads them to do nothing about actually fixing the problem. But when we call it what it really is, now, for some people, about 1 to 5% of the population, it really is an addiction. It really is a pathology. And that's a whole nother story. But for 95 to 99% of us, it's not an addiction. It's a distraction. But when we call it what it really is, oh, it's a distraction. Ooh, that's no fun. Now I got to do something about it, right? Can I just blame Zuckerberg for doing this to me?
Yeah.
Well, for the vast majority of people, it's not their fault. Well, let me say this. It is their fault. Okay. You didn't invent Facebook. You didn't invent the iPhone. You didn't invent email. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, because who else is going to fix it for us? Right? We have to do something about this, because there will be this great bifurcation. There already is, between people who allow their time and attention to be controlled and manipulated by others, and people who say, no, I decide how I will control my time. I decide how I will control my attention, because I am indistractable. And those will be the people who do great things in the world and are able to make change, because there is no facet of your life that is not affected by your ability to control and sustain your attention, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, your job. All of these things depend upon your ability to control your attention, your time, because it's how we choose our life.
So is there room, or is there place for these hooked principles? I know we're grappling back and forth between your two books here, but is there a place where the hooked principles can be used in a destructive way? Like can be atom bombed, or no, that it's something where you don't believe in that whatsoever?
Well, look, any product that is an analgesic is potentially addictive. Any analgesic. What does that mean? Anything that solves pain will addict someone if it is used by a sufficiently large number of people. There are people out there, I'm not making this up, look at the psychological annals, like you will find this, who are addicted to water. This is a real thing. There are people who are addicted to water because water solves the pain of thirst. There are people who get addicted to all sorts of things. Now, it's never just about the product. Nobody becomes an addict by stepping on a heroin needle. That's not how addiction works. Addiction is always the confluence of the person, the product clearly plays a role, and the pain they are dealing with that they can't escape in a healthy way. So it's always about the confluence of those three factors. Now, the product definitely plays a role, but it's never the cause, right? You know, millions of women every single year, if they deliver a baby through cesarean section, are given fentanyl. Fentanyl is the most addictive substance we know. And so if it's the product's fault, if it's, hey, fentanyl causes addiction, why aren't these women who give birth all addicted? Very few of them ever become addicted to fentanyl because they don't have the confluence of those other two factors. So it's never just the substance itself. That's not how addiction works. An addicted person has a pathology. There's always some kind of backstory, trauma, OCD, severe depression, anxiety disorder. There's always something else going on. But that doesn't mean the product doesn't play a role. So what I advocate for is that if there's a product that does potentially create an addiction, it is your responsibility as the product maker to intervene for people who are potentially addictive. So I've been saying this for years now, that we need what's called a use and abuse policy, that companies that make products that are potentially addictive, for example, online products, need to be able to reach out and say, hey, we see you're using our product for whatever it is, 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week, make up some number.
Yeah.
Can we help? Right? There should be that use and abuse policy for these type of products. Now, online products can do this. Offline products can't. How does an alcohol manufacturer know who's addicted? They don't know.
Yeah.
But these tech companies have personally identifiable information. They know how much we're using. And so I think those companies do have a moral obligation, and I think it should be law to reach out to people who are this protected class of being addicted. But if you're not a child, right? So children are a protected class. And I think people who are pathologically addicted should be a protected class. But if you're not one of those two, it's on you, right? It's going to be your responsibility.
Where does what role does community play in becoming indistractable?
What do you mean? Tell me more.
So what I mean by that is I make up a story that so if I go, cool, I'm listening to Nir right now, this is making sense, I want to become indistractable, I want to be more intentful with what I choose, I make up the story that my friend Alejandro is on here listening. And if I go, and I'm speaking with him on Friday this week, if I go, all right, Ale, what are you working on where you want to keep focus? What am I working on? How can we share and form community such that together we can help one another create greater indistractability? I'm just making up that community can be a helpful thing here. Am I onto something?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few ways. One is by spreading what's called social antibodies. Social antibodies are when society inoculates itself from harmful behaviors by spreading new norms, new manners. And let me give you a great example. So there was a time when we started. The reason I'm so optimistic about the fact that we can get over the negative aspects of technology overuse, and why I'm very optimistic about the fact that we can become indistractable as a society, is that we've been here before with a much more addictive technology, and that is cigarettes. So I grew up in the 1980s. I was born in the 70s, but I remember the 1980s very clearly as a child. And I remember in my household, in my living room, we had ashtrays. My parents didn't smoke, but I'm telling you, everybody back then had ashtrays in their house. Every household, whether you smoked or not, you had ashtrays. Why? Because back in the 1980s, back when, what was it, 40% of the US adult population smoked, now it's about 14% and dropping. Back then, people just expected to smoke in your living room. Can you imagine if someone came to your house and just lit up a cigarette without asking? That would be
where's your ashtray?
Oh my God, that would be incredibly rude. You would never see that today. Why? Was there a law that said no smoking in people's private residence? No, that's never happened. What changed was we as a society inoculated ourselves against these unhealthy behaviors, and we made it now rude to smoke in someone's home. So when my mom took away the ashtrays in our house, she threw them away, and when one of her friends came over and wanted to smoke and took out a pack of cigarettes and was about to smoke it, she said, oh, I'm sorry, we are non-smokers, right? She used that identity as we are non-smokers. If you'd like to smoke, if you'd kindly go outside. And at first, this was a big deal. How could you ask me to smoke out? This was like very unconventional that you would ask someone to do this. Well, this is exactly the same struggle that we're going through today, which is why the book is called Indistractable. Indistractable is meant to sound like indestructible. It's an identity, because the identity, there's a section in the book about identity pacts. And we know from the psychology of religion that when people call themselves a moniker, right? When you have an identity, a noun that you use to describe yourself, not that, you know, I turn off my phone. No, but it's who I am. It becomes an identity, a moniker. So for example, a vegetarian doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I wonder if I should have a bacon sandwich for breakfast. No, it's who they are. It is their identity. They are a vegetarian. So if you're listening to the sound of my voice right now, you can proudly call yourself indistractable. That is who you are. And is it a little bit different? Is it a little bit weird? Yeah. Just as it was weird that my mom asked people not to smoke in her house. So yeah, I'm indistractable. What does that mean? Well, you know what? I don't respond to every text message and email within 30 seconds. You know why? I'm indistractable. You know what? When I work in the office, I put up a little sign that tells people when I cannot be disturbed because I'm indistractable. You know what? I make a schedule for myself so I know the difference between traction and distraction throughout my day, right? Is this any more different and weird and unusual than someone who wears religious garb or someone who has an unconventional diet? No, we as a society can accept this. And in fact, we need to accept this. We need to spread these social antibodies. So in terms of community, this is our moral obligation to become indistractable and to show others how great life can be when we control our attention.
Beautiful. Beautiful. There is a habit I formed, which I haven't been as good at lately, but you're reminding me to do it better, which is when I go to my parents' home, which is a mere 7 minutes from where I live. And often when I go there, it's a family gathering. And I go, there's really no one who would need to contact me on my phone who's more important than the people here, unless there's a particular project or something that's time sensitive, important, great. But I developed a practice where I would go in, I would take my phone out of my pocket and I would put it down on the counter and just have it live there. And something really funny would happen when I would get a text message or something. And my mom would say, Stevie, you have a text message. And I go, guess what, Mom? It'll be there in 10 minutes too. And I just trained myself.
Yes.
I'm here to be with you.
Yes. It's so important. And what's interesting, you know, so I get hired a lot to give big presentations in front of corporations on how to become indistractable. And oftentimes they call me in and they say, oh, you know what, these millennials, these Gen Xers, or not Gen X, Gen Z, I guess it would be. Yeah. They're so connected. They're always on their devices. You need to come in here and help us get them off their devices so they can do their work. So, okay, I'll come in and I'll teach them, I'll give my spiel on how to become indistractable. I walk into the boardroom and guess who is on their devices? Is it the young people? No. It's the big boss who wants to show everybody how important they are because they have to check email all the time, right? It's the older generation that hasn't learned that it's rude to do this in front of people. So we need to spread these social antibodies. We have to teach other people how to do this, right? So my father is a perfect example. When my father was a child, there was one telephone in his entire village. And if that phone rang, it was always long distance. So you had to pick up the phone. It was super important that you picked up the phone. Until this very day, if a phone rings, now that he has a cell phone, if his cell phone rings, he has to pick it up. It drives him crazy not to pick it up. Whereas for me, if a phone rang and I'm in the middle of a conversation with you, we're having lunch together, I wouldn't dream of picking it up. It's so rude to do to somebody, but they didn't learn these manners. They didn't learn these norms, but the younger generation does know these norms. And so that's why I'm very optimistic that we're going to get through this.
I'm sure telemarketers love your father. Always picks up. Always picks up.
Yes. I think he individually keeps them in business.
Yeah. I want to make sure, please hop into the chat, seeing some great comments and engagements here. But if you have any questions for Nir before our time is up, we have no more than about 5 or 10 minutes here. So please hop into the chat and ask any questions you might have for him on how to be indistractable or to create something positively hooking. You said we were going to talk about to-do lists and how they're awful. Go for it.
Okay, why are to-do lists bad for your personal productivity? So first of all, let me clarify here. I'm not saying that writing things down, taking things out of your brain and putting them on a piece of paper or in an app, that's great. You should do that. What's bad is running your life on a to-do list. So if you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, what should I do today? And the first place you look is a to-do list, you've already lost. What you should be looking at is your calendar, your schedule, because you cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. Let me say that again. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So if you have lots of open white space on your calendar, what are you complaining about? What did you get distracted from? You didn't plan ahead. So you have no right to say you got distracted unless you can show me, here's what I plan to do, but I didn't do it. So you have to use your schedule as your means of deciding what to do with your time, not your to-do list. Why? To-do lists have no constraints. You can always add more to a to-do list, right? Whereas a calendar has the same constraint of 24 hours for every human being on the face of the earth. And you can always make more money. People are so cheap with their money. They clip coupons, they split checks. They're so cheap with their money, but they're so liberal with their time. And their time is the one thing you can't make more of. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. So we should be generous with our money because we can make more, and we should be stingy with our time. So a time box calendar, and I didn't invent this technique, but it's something I highly advocate for. And it turns out it is the most well-studied, well-researched time management technique. It's by far the most effective thing you can do for your time management and your attention management is to decide in advance how you're going to spend your time. If you are one of these people who measures themselves by how many cute little boxes you check off, you are going to be incentivized to do the easy stuff, the urgent stuff, not the important stuff. And so stop measuring yourself by how many cute little boxes you checked off your list, and rather measure yourself by one metric only. And that is, did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? That's it. It's not about finishing the task. It's, did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? And here's the kicker. People who use that technique, who use that metric as the sole metric of success, not did I finish, but did I do what I said I was going to do without distraction for as long as I said I would, they actually finish more. They actually get more done than the to-do list devotees. And they feel better about it too. Here's why. When you use a to-do list, which nobody ever finishes, right? Studies find that about 80% of what's on people's to-do list, they never do. And so what happens? You come home from work, you look at your to-do list, and it's still a mile long. You've worked real hard all day, but you haven't done everything on that to-do list. And so what does that tell you? What does that say to your psyche when here's all these promises you made to yourself and you didn't do them?
Yeah.
Loser. So you're teaching yourself, I'm no good at time management. You hear people saying this ridiculous stuff like, oh, I'm no good at time management, or I have a short attention span, or whatever. I'm a Sagittarius. That's why I can't do this. It's lies. They don't serve you. It's not that you're broken. It's that the technique is broken. So as opposed to just having this long to-do list, what you want to do is to turn your values into time. Turn your values into time by making time for traction. So you know what you are going to work on. Now, I'm not saying about every 2-minute increment, but 30-minute blocks up to 3 or 4 hour blocks of time that hey, here is what I will be doing with my time and my attention. Why is this so important? One, it helps you calibrate how long things take you. People who use to-do lists have no idea how long tasks take them because they're not able to calibrate that, right? They work on a task for 5 minutes, and then they do something else for 5 minutes, and then they do something else, and they don't know how long things actually take them. Whereas people who time box will be able to say, okay, I worked on this task for 30 minutes and I got about 10% done. Okay, that means I need 9 more sessions like this in order to finish the project. They're much better at calibrating how long things take them to do. And most importantly, they can actually enjoy leisure time. People who run their life on a to-do list are constantly thinking about all the things that are left undone. And I used to do this all the time. I would come home from work and all I want to do is spend time with my daughter or watch a show on Netflix or just relax on the couch. And I'm constantly thinking, oh man, there's all these things I still haven't done. Whereas an indistractable person knows, hey, this is my social media checking time. It's on my calendar, right? This is my Netflix time. It's on my schedule. This is my time to play with my kids. It's on my schedule. And anything else suddenly is a distraction, right? Because I have identified what is traction. And this is how people who are indistractable, they actually enjoy the leisure time because they know there's nowhere else they need to be.
Nice. And so you're not saying don't write out stuff that you wish to accomplish or get stuff that's here and out there, but then use block and tackle and say, design your day-to-day, week-to-week using your values in terms of how you wish to spend your time.
Right. And this is the 30,000 foot version. I take you step by step exactly on how to do it in Indistractable, of course.
Nice. Beautiful. A couple questions coming in here and then we will wrap up. Here's a couple from LinkedIn user. I'm not sure if it's the same LinkedIn user, but what are your best practices for managing the distractions of email messages, ping, especially those that are work related?
Yes, this is a big one. So email is the bane of every knowledge worker's existence these days. And it turns out that about 25% of the messages we receive, studies have found, there was a study in the Harvard Business Review that shared this, that 25% of the emails that the average knowledge worker receives, they did not need to receive. And 25% of the emails they send, they did not need to send. So email is a gigantic waste of time. So here's a few quick tips that you can use. The idea here is that when we study where people waste time on email, it's not the replying that wastes time. It's the checking, and most specifically, the rechecking that wastes time. What does this look like? You get an email, you open it, you read it. Okay, you put it away. You read the next email. 10 minutes later, what did that first email say again? Oh, let me recheck it. Okay, I'll come back to that later. 30 minutes later, you open it again. That's where we waste a tremendous amount of time on email. So here's what we have to do with email. Number one, we schedule time when we are going to reply to email. Don't go to email. This is what most people, low performers, they use email as a pacifier. right? Like a baby sucking on a binky or a pacifier, right? Every time they don't know what to do with their time, what am I supposed to do with my time? Email, right? Every time I'm working on a project and it's a little hard, I don't want to do it right now, email, because email feels productive. Email will tell me what to do. Email will tell me what my life is about. And it's not. It's a terrible trap. What you have to do is to have time in your calendar to check email. By the way, it can be every hour. That's fine, but do it on a schedule. Put it on your schedule when you want to check email. And here's what you want to do when you check email. You need to have a rule that says that you only touch each email maximum of 2 times. The first time you open that email, your job is not to reply right now, right? I know that some other people say if a task takes you less than 2 minutes, you just do it. That's terrible advice. It's totally outdated, because emails, if many emails take less than 2 minutes, but if you're getting 50, 60 emails a day, you're wasting a ton of time doing these 2-minute tasks. So that's bad advice. What you want to do every time you get an email, the first time you open it, you need to ask yourself one question, not what is in the email. The most important question is, when does this need a reply? Okay, when does this need a reply? Then you're going to have a few answers. One answer might be never. Okay, great. Archive it, delete it, never see it again. Another might be, oh my God, this is super urgent. I have to reply right away. That's about less than 1% of emails, because if your house is on fire, they're not going to email you. They're going to call you. They're going to text you. They're going to send you a different message. But it's that fear that, oh my God, this is so urgent, I have to check email every 5 minutes. That's a fear. That's not real. It's just a feeling. So very rarely do you have emails that must be replied to right this second. Okay. Most of your emails, 99, 100% of your emails are going to fall into 2 categories. Either they need a reply today, or they need a reply sometime this week. Your job is to label that email by when it needs a reply. If it needs a reply today, you label it as such. If you don't know how to label emails, Google it. Every email software provider can do this. Label it as today. That's about, on average, 20%, 20% of the average knowledge worker's emails need a reply today. The other 80% can be replied to sometime this week. Then what you want to do is have time on your calendar to only reply every day to the emails that need a reply today. Okay. Now, where's the magic, right? How do you reduce the time you actually spend on email? Aren't you just punting the time for later? Here's where the magic happens. It turns out, studies find that of that 80% of your emails, if you let them simmer, if you just let them wait a few days, 80% of that 80%, 50% of those emails don't need a reply after a few days.
Because what happens, you meet them, or yeah.
People, the priority that was important Monday, by Wednesday, it's not a priority anymore. People figured out their own issues. They did some research and they fixed their own problems. So what you want to do is to let time for those 50% of the 80% to decay. Right. And don't need to reply. What happens is most people, they reply to the emails that are super easy to reply to, whether they need a reply or not, whether they can wait or not. And then they start getting to this email ping pong game, right? You send, they send, you send, they send. So it's a basic rule that if you want to receive fewer emails in a given period of time, you have to send fewer emails in a given period of time. And the only way to slow down that email ping pong game is to only reply to emails that need a reply urgently. Right. So if they need a reply today, put time in your calendar. So every day I have 1 hour where I reply to today's urgent emails. Right. But all the emails that don't need a reply this week, I have time. I call it Message Mondays, when I have a 3-hour block of time when I go through all those emails that need a reply sometime this week but aren't urgent. And you will find that this will dramatically reduce the time you spend on email, because you're only replying to emails by when they need a reply.
Got it. That's why I got an email from you on Monday. It all makes sense now. This is good. Nir, we're at time. There's a couple more interesting questions here. Do you have time for a couple more?
Let's do it.
Cool. So there's one, Joshua Leibster. Good to see you on here, Joshua. And this is fun because we're actually doing a live tomorrow with Nate Swan and Hiran Shulka on neurodivergent people. There are a lot of neurodivergent people, ADHD, that struggle with even doing what you set out to do, and also thrive with constant reminders. Where does your structure method meet and or conflict with those folks? Thoughts here, Nir? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going on to Medium because I just posted an article that I wrote where I actually spoke with an ADHD coach about this very question. Now, I didn't write Indistractable for people suffering from ADHD, but Many of the tactics in the book, all the tactics in the book, can be applied by anyone. So let me put in, I don't know if you can share, I put it in our chat. If you can share that on Medium as well, or on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
This is an article I just published this yesterday on how people with ADHD can utilize Indistractable. The important thing here is that, everybody can become indistractable with this book. It's not written specifically for people with ADHD, but even people with ADHD, every counselor, every psychiatrist will tell you first you want to utilize non-pharmaceutical solutions, because every pharmaceutical has side effects. The first thing you want to do is to use all the non-pharmaceutical techniques at your disposal. So, ADHD is a disorder. It's not, a lot of people, they talk about it the same way they would talk about addiction, that, oh, I have ADHD. Well, if you haven't been to a psychiatrist, if you haven't gotten a diagnosis, like, you really need to stop saying that, because it's disrespectful for people who actually do have ADHD. And you're just proving to yourself that you're somehow limited in a way that you're not. So don't call yourself ADHD unless you actually do have it. But if you do have it, what I would recommend is to use some of these non-pharmaceutical techniques along with your counselor, along with your coach or your doctor. But for some people, they may need, additional help. They may need pharmaceuticals or other solutions as well.
Awesome. I have that link. I will post it in the live and tag you, Joshua, then. And if you're able, Joshua, tune in tomorrow, where I'm talking about how creating more neurodiverse cultures will just create better cultures altogether, which is very cool. One last question for you. There's some great questions in here. Nir does some Q&A on his own LinkedIn channel, so please feel free to get them to him. How do people send you Q&A? Is that through your website, or because I know you do some live Q&A?
Yeah. So if you check out my feed on LinkedIn, I'll answer questions. And when people have more questions, they can just respond to those questions, or you can just DM me on any one of those platforms and I'll likely see it.
Amazing. So if your question didn't get answered today, feel free to ping Nir direct, and you might get featured in one of his weekly Q&As. Last one for you here, Nir. Any ideas, tips for someone building a new team from scratch on how to create an indistractable team?
So there's a whole section in the book on how to build an indistractable workplace. And this is super important because, look, there's a lot of things we can do as individuals, but we work in various environments. And so if your environment is very distractible, the people within it will be very distractible. So the key takeaway that I learned is that distraction in the workplace is a symptom of a cultural dysfunction. Distraction in the workplace is a symptom of a cultural dysfunction. So when it comes to, if you have the opportunity to build a team, you can set that culture. The most important thing you can do is to be indistractable yourself. This is advice I give to CEOs as well as parents, right? If you want your employees to be indistractable, you can't check email during the middle of a meeting. You have to show them what it means to be indistractable. If you're a parent, you can't tell your kids stop playing Fortnite while you're checking Facebook. It doesn't work that way. You have to set a good example. But in the book, we talk about this at length around the 3 traits of an indistractable workplace and how any culture can become indistractable.
Nice. And even if you're leading a team, you can create a subculture within that team, or these are the norms on this team, even if it's counter or different to the overall culture. This is what we do. This is how we show up.
That's right. You can start small, but if you're in a position of leadership, there's a lot you can do for sure.
Nice. Yeah. A whisper is a shout as a leader. Love it. Nir, this has been such a treat. Thank you for your generosity of time. I think we're bleeding into your 1 hour of email responses in a day, so I appreciate it. Any closing words? People can learn more. Check out Nir's page on LinkedIn, his website, nirandfar.com. Anything else from you just to close out today? And a thank you again.
I appreciate it, Chet. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Take care, all, and know that you can be indistractable. It's a choice. You can do it. Work on it and work on it together. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.